unification movement changed their lives.
Some people gave up.
Why did you stay? Hey everyone! For today's episode of our show, we have a really special guest. All the way from Switzerland, we have Chantal, and I believe her story is definitely worth hearing it. Chantal, we're really happy to have you here in Ireland. Welcome.
Thank you.
How do you like it so far? Tell us everything.
Oh, wow. We had a day trip today, and it was exciting to hear about the history of Ireland, but also to see the incredible things that were built, like this Black Abbey. That really impressed me very much.
Talking about our topic today, what is your personal journey? Where did it start? How did you become a member of Unification Movement?
Well, it's a long time ago, but actually it's very present in my mind. You know, I was born in a family of factory workers. My dad and my mom, they had come out of the war, couldn't study. And so their desire was for their children to have everything that they didn't have, you know, good education and material things. So they inspired that in us, you know, and I did everything they wanted, you know. I played the piano. I studied well. I became an electrical engineer, one woman among 100 men, you know, and I did everything like the feeling I'm gonna finally be happy because I will have fulfilled everything. And then I worked for 2 years. And then I realized, no, that's not the life that I want, you know. And then I felt like, well, I have the choice to do like other people, you know, to put an end to my life, or to get into drugs and things like that, or to leave everything behind and start traveling and looking, searching for something different. And that's what I did. So backpack, well, I stopped my job, backpack, and I left and I went to South Italy, to Greece, then to India. And in India, it was such a different reality. I was feeling like, wow, there's so many people doing strange things, but I was starting to feel more spiritual, not just, you know, thinking of science, not just thinking of material things. And what happened there in the very north of India, in Sikkim, before entering Sikkim, that's a little Indian kingdom between Nepal and Bhutan. When I was there, after going through Nepal and India, right, I went there, and at the entrance of Sikkim, there is a place where you have to go to get your visa. I was changing money in the bank, and who came to me? A Swiss priest, because he saw my passport. And then he invited me to go around, and then I went to see another priest. He recommended another priest in the north, more north, you know, in the capital of Sikkim. And there I waited for that priest, and I went with him on his jeep to his little village where he was being a missionary. And there he saw my name and he said, but I just read something about a man who has the same name. And it was my grand uncle.
Wow.
Who had just died a year before in India because he had become a missionary to India, and he had died at the age of 95. And I started to feel like, but that's a little too much in coincidence to be scientific, right? So I started really feeling something. And then what I did is I went to the different places where this grand uncle had been, and I met the people, first the students that he had taught. He had taught Latin and history in Pondicherry, right, in a small seminary. And then to the place where he passed, his last years of his life. It was in Bangalore. And so I was really full of some new experience. I was reading the Bible. I was really getting into a new way of looking at life. And then I went to Sri Lanka, I went to Malaysia, and then Singapore, and finally to Australia. And in all these other places, I met many Christians, born again Christians, really full of life and hope. And I felt really great. But in Australia, I met another country like Switzerland. You go into a church, people are very serious, and nobody talks to you. You go out and you feel lonely, right? So I really prayed God at that point that I may meet another person, a person who could tell me things to make me become closer to God, right? Who could uncover something. And one day I was just walking in the city of Adelaide, and I saw a girl there. She was just giving out flyers, and I thought in my mind, that's her. So I went to her and I started asking questions, and that's how I met this movement.
Wow.
Right? And it was about the Messiah, a Messiah through whom you can get rid of original sin. And this was the thing in my Catholic upbringing. The original sin is something that makes your life miserable because you want to do good things, but you can't.
It holds you back.
Yeah, this contradiction, and I thought, that's exactly what I need, this, this ceremony or whatever it was, I didn't know yet. So that would allow me to get rid of that, right? So, but actually, there was no family there at that time. So I had to hitchhike. In Australia, I really felt like I want to understand more about God. So I prayed really fervently. I want to meet someone who can tell me more, right? So the next day I was just walking around Adelaide, and I see this girl who was just giving out flyers. And then I felt, oh, that's her. So I went to her. And that's the first step how I joined this movement.
That was your first encounter?
Yes.
Wow. From Switzerland to Australia.
Exactly.
It cannot be a coincidence. Your spiritual journey was a real journey. You went through so many places following the footsteps of your ancestors. Can we say that?
Yeah.
And since you had an encounter with so many religions, it is so interesting how their core beliefs intertwine. What about Unification Movement core beliefs? Is there any similarities between those you've already studied?
There are so many similarities, but when you go into details, then there are the rituals, and there are these absolute beliefs that people do not want to talk about or to change, with the feeling that they might be unfaithful to their religion, right? So what happens in the Unification Movement with, let's say, the principle, right? There are things that are basic to all religions. It's like the bottom line in each religion is the teaching of absolute values and principles by which to live. If you look at the life of Jesus, then that's one example of what the religion wants to teach. The question is, how much can the people who follow that religion really practice that?
Embrace that.
Embrace that. And this is the bottom line. And as soon as a religion, I met many people of different religions. And for example, in Singapore, people would not even think of another way for a Messiah to come back, but on the clouds. And I thought, from my engineer viewpoint, but how can you believe something like that, right? But they would not give up on that. So in this movement, I felt it's much broader. I have the freedom of religion and belief. So I can listen to anybody and reflect on it, and then feel like oh, that's interesting, and choose how I want to continue in my path.
That's interesting. And if we pinpointed the similarities, what would be one difference? What is the core belief of the unification movement that made you feel like, yes, this is it?
It again has to do with this grand uncle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just felt like it's incredible that I would meet him like that in a totally unknown place, spiritually. So when I was in Melbourne, right, there was this person showing some slides, and we were looking at them, and it was like in my head triggering, oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that makes sense, like that. And then the point where it was explained about returning resurrection. That means the point where once you pass to the spirit world, you can communicate with a person on earth that has some kind of commonalities with you, and work with that person to continue your path, but also to support that person to continue the path. When I heard that, it was like I met this grand uncle spiritually, and my spirit went so high. I was like in another world. I was all at once, everything became clear. And I had this feeling of incredible love, that I could love everyone, right? And it was my whole body, all the cells of my body were tingling. It's like an out of the world experience, right? That always remained with me. Okay? And that could explain all these different things that, for example, in Buddhism, karma or reincarnation. It was a new way that really fit with my own conscience, with my own mind.
It just
So
felt right.
yes, it felt right. So it was like 24 hours in this state and then right back to where I was. But this experience really made a big difference in my life.
We learned about how you joined. What about finding a life partner? Another life stage that everyone is so worried about, that everyone is thinking about. What is the view of the movement on marriage, relationships, and how was it implied in your life?
Marriage is one of the missions in life, right? According to Unification Movement. And at that point, when I joined this movement and started learning about the principle, and when I started also to grow spiritually into appreciating others and not just being egocentrical and individualistic, then I thought, yeah, that's the next step. I really want to get married. But then it was also associated with the world peace blessing, right? Not just a normal marriage, but a world peace blessing. Understanding that getting married to someone from a different continent was an opportunity to build bridges between two continents, between two different cultures, different religions. So my desire was to have someone from Asia. I had this desire also when I was a kid. I also looked at my eyes and I thought, oh, it's so much nicer, slanted eyes. and so that was my desire. And actually, I was very grateful that I could receive a Japanese husband. I would have preferred a Korean one, but at that point, there weren't no Korean ones, right? It was in 1987. It was a matching, just two people put together. And then these two people have to say, oh, no, no way. Or they have to say, well, why not? And this was my husband and my reaction, right? Well, why not? I mean, we're here to build world peace. So let's go on with it, right? And actually, the blessing, the marriage, only took place 2 years later in 1809. So we had time to exchange letters. That time, the telephone was very expensive, actually. So we were still writing
Hard to imagine.
letters. Yeah, I mean, it's like almost 40 years ago, right? It's a long time.
Well, how was following the principles of the movement together? Not alone anymore, but sharing this path with a person so different from you, I can imagine.
Yeah. If I had known how hard it is to live in Japan, with a Japanese man, probably I would have chosen something else, right? But it was a challenge, and I knew the more difficult it is, the more breakthroughs we can have, you know? And I was thinking, the children of such a couple, they're naturally into both cultures, right? They naturally grow up speaking French and speaking Japanese, right? So, and understanding both ways of life. So that was my hope. And with my husband, you know, when we went through hard times, what we did is reconnect to this one family, one human family under God, right? And if we have this purpose in life, whatever the differences are, whatever the difficulties we go through, we find a way, you know? And that's really what I feel is missing in the society, to have a common purpose that goes beyond my own personal desires and his own personal desires, knowing that both aspirations also need to be fulfilled, and both people still have to be able to grow in that kind of marriage relationship.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that building a family, not just for the sake of two people, but with this big world peace image, is already quite a spiritual experience as well. But would you have any other experiences of your life, or maybe the lives of people you know, where unification movement changed their lives? You know, any experiences that we can see in around us, maybe in people we know or people you met?
Some people gave up, right, after a while and left.
Naturally.
And then I realized, well, they could have gone through it and they could have built a wonderful family and also experienced this change of heart inside, right? The growing through reaching one's own limits, right? That's the point. When I reach my limits, then I realize, hey, I still have a way to go. If I don't reach them, I think I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about.
You're in a comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. So going beyond that allows us to go further. So this understanding allowed my husband and I to continue. So I realized people who didn't get that, maybe they left. You know, they thought, oh no, it's too hard. It's not for me. Right?
Yeah.
And other people in society, I experienced so many people. You know, like cousins and and friends who got married, but then who got divorced. You know, so many.
But there's so many things in the world that cause people falling apart, right? It's a tragedy, really, but keeping a family these days is really a challenge.
Right.
And let's face it, the world is not a peaceful world that unification movement is talking about. How do you connect the ideal and the reality? What is the view of Unification Church on movement, on everything that's happening these days?
I understand that there's a mess up of values, right? We were before like under a religion that dictated a conduct. And then some people just left that because they wanted freedom. And then in the realm of freedom, there is this problem. If we don't have absolute values, freedom becomes self-destructive. And that's the whole point, to be able to understand these absolute values and principles that don't limit the freedom, but that allow a person like me, like my husband, to see, oh, this will not help us to continue to grow. This will also have bad consequences on the family and on other people. So understanding that and working with the understanding how to live one's life in a constructive way can actually make the freedom much bigger. Right? So the freedom within the principle is really what we learned to live by. And many, many times we saw our shortcomings. And that's the reality also towards our children. You know, we want to be the best parents, and then we realize, oh, we're still so far away.
Mm.
Maybe the whole point is we had that model. We still have this model of true parents, right? A model of true parents means they're people whose desire is to contribute to a world of peace, whose desire is whatever they do, it has to be for a higher purpose, right? And so, inspired by that and looking at that, we could work on our own, shortcomings, my husband and myself.
Yeah.
So that's what kept us together, and that's what kept us growing. And our children saw these limits, so they understood actually it's not the ideal world, but we're working at it.
Yeah.
You know.
So would you put this concept of two parents that you mentioned as this ideal, a guiding star in your life, or are they real people with their problems and issues that they're going through? Because there's a lot of controversy in the media about the founders of the movement, right? How do you see them in your personal life journey?
Yeah. When reading the words, I feel very inspired. And also the autobiographies of both, right? I feel like what they went through is incredible. I could never have gone through such difficult situations. And then I realized that what they're saying, what they're writing, what they're speaking is what they're actually living, what they're doing. And so for me, it's a model, right? And it's only when you have an open heart and you want to see the good things in someone that you can also like model that and you want to continue on this path. And that's what happened to my husband and I, because we respected them and we saw there's no hypocrisy, not like in olden times in our own religions, right? You say something, but you do something else. So in them, I realized there is no contradiction. And they stayed together and they've always made effort. So early in the morning, in everything they did, they invested everything. So this was an inspiration. And our desire was to become like them, to go as far as possible in that.
We've talked about how you joined and opened this world of different religions and teachings and very spiritual things. We talked about your family, which sounds absolutely lovely and amazing. And I want to know what happened between you leaving all the world behind and going into the spiritual journey and you sitting here talking about world peace and family that you're building for the sake of the world. Were there any dreams, your personal pursuings that you had to give up maybe? Was there something that actually became true through joining this movement and changing your life?
That's a good question. I mean, remember, I left Switzerland because I was very unhappy. I was just thinking about myself, and I hadn't reached the happiness that was promised to me if I did all these normal things. Well, my brother and my sister were happy there. They didn't leave everything. But for me, that was not what I wanted. So meeting this movement brought me something that I must say now, I never regret having done it because I lived in the four corners of the world. Also, I could go on a mission in Bolivia, for example.
Wow.
My husband stayed in Japan with 3 children, and I could go on a mission in Bolivia. And that really opened up a new thing. I didn't feel that it was a personal sacrifice, although at that point I really missed my children and my husband. So I remember an experience where I cried so much. I cried because I missed them so much. And then I could connect with the deeper heart of a parent, of God, a parent, right, who misses all his children, right? Because that's the reality of a parent, wants to be with all his children. So like transcending this own personal feeling and feeling something like cosmic just was such a deep experience in which I felt the greatest sorrow, right? And at the same time, the greatest joy of having this transcendental experience. So Did I did I regret? No, I never regretted. I mean, there's sometimes I was in front of the choice. Do I stay or do I live? And then it was enough thinking where I was before and looking around me to make it clear, no, I'm happy here. You know? Even living in Japan in difficult circumstances with in-laws, you know. And I didn't look at all like a Japanese woman, right? So I felt critique on my side, right? But I learned Japanese. And because I learned Japanese and I could teach English conversation and so, then everybody accepted me after that, you know. So in a way, I saw along the path some breakthroughs, and I realized, hey, I am gaining so much in personal growth of heart and also growth of understanding, learning all kinds of new languages and learning all kinds of new cultures and being able to freely communicate with people from the whole world. And this was for me a big win, right? So the sacrifices of leaving something, you know, behind was so much compensated. It's hard to believe, right?
With everything
But
that
it
came.
was compensated with what I got. And now looking back, you know, we had 4 children, right? All 4 are married. I have 6 grandchildren. My
Wow.
husband passed, you know, 5 years ago. But I feel like, yeah, together we're continuing. And I mean, it would be so difficult if my children had chosen a different path. Right? But they have the same vision, right, of world peace and one human family, that it makes us feel like it's possible. You know, when a dream is felt like it's possible, you just want to continue. Once you lose hope, then you're miserable.
Yeah. Would you say that this hope for one united world or humanity was it the dream that kept you going for 40 years again and again through all the challenges that you mentioned when you had a choice to leave, maybe?
Mm.
What helped you to overcome those?
Yeah, that dream, but also looking at myself and comparing myself with what I was before I joined this movement, having everything and not being happy. That's the worst thing that can happen to anyone in the world. You know, if you miss this or that, and you think, okay, if I get this and this and that, I'll be happy, right? Then you still have hope, you can be happy. But if you had it all and it didn't make you happy, you realize that's not the thing. What makes you happy is this love, right? That loving vertically towards up, right? And loving vertically towards the children, loving horizontally towards other people, and towards the spouse, right? So these 4 kinds of love, when I felt that my heart was becoming a little bigger, 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 I felt that, wow, that raised the level of happiness that I could experience through all that, even though sometimes I went through total hell. But these breakthroughs really made it possible for me to keep going.
It was worth it all.
Yeah, it was worth it
Definitely.
after all. Yeah.
Wow, I feel your story is just amazing, Chantal, and is a real inspiration for all of us to go on that search, on that journey for something that fuels our hearts, makes us want to go to pursue something bigger than us, right? And it's not just a religious thing, it's a universal call to find something that makes you want to build your life based on that and, you know, pursue your dreams and wishes.
Yeah, right. I never felt that I'm in a religion. I felt I am feeding my spirituality and taking care of my body.
Why are you still here? Why did you stay?
I stayed because it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that universal principles exist and that our conscience can really deal with what is right and wrong. First of all, understanding that we all humanity, we come from the same origin. right? And that same origin, being a heavenly parent to all of us. I see in many religions, it's only that religion that will lead people to heaven. But in this, it's like all humanity, right? Forming a family and being able to experience that same happiness. The second thing is, as a human being, I don't just take care of my physical needs, but as a human being, my spiritual being is spiritual and moral being is even more important, right? And then also the family. I didn't understand that the family was important. Look at the world. So many countries have a problem because people don't get married anymore. And because even if they get married, they don't want children, right? So in this understanding, the family and the growth of heart in the family as the first school of love is essential. And also the fact of living for the sake of others, right? Not just my own salvation, but we live together, we grow together, right? And living for the sake of others is also one of those universal principles that help us contribute to a world of peace. And finally, the fact of having all together from different nations, from different religions, from different cultures, to come together and cooperate. And cooperating to build a society and a world of interdependent human beings. Not just one is controlling the other one, but really interdependent beings that can also feel like we can share things together, right? And based on these universal values, universal principles. And this is what I'm doing. You know, I'm teaching that, and teaching it and sharing it with others gives me so much energy. And I feel many people are responding to that because it's universal. It doesn't go into theology. It doesn't go into belief. It goes into something that is very deep in everyone's heart and mind and conscience.
Thank you, Chantal. That was beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing your life journey and so many things you're passionate about with us. We hope you're going to have a beautiful stay in Ireland and going to have the chance to see so many things and, of course, come back here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
It was our
Thank you.
pleasure as well.